friends. It's Romania Black, and we are on episode 8 of Ping Pong, the animation, the Rule of 8, baby! If you're not familiar with the Rule of 8, I have on my channel this rule has been there for the last 4 years, but anytime you have a season or series that is 11 episodes to 13 episodes, typically the 8th episode, by default, is going to be a good one. So that's for a number of reasons. My contribution to it is usually around the 8th episode in a short series like that. You're turning into the final act. Things are taking a twist, and that seems to be the case with this show. So I have been beyond elated. I have been forced to wait to watch this episode to catch up with my other reactions on the channel, and now we're here, and I am so excited, and I cannot wait for this week. So we do have some comments to talk about before we get too much started into this, and these are comments ranging from episode 2 all the way to like episode 6. So there's a lot of variance, but I'm so excited people are getting into the series. I'm so excited people are watching. If you haven't been watching, you should be watching. Tell your friends. If your friends are into anime and they're like, I don't know about sports anime, make them watch this. Like, force them. Bribe them with popcorn. I don't care how you do it. Just free food. Just pay them $1. I don't know. Just make them sit down and watch this show because it's so good. And I've been so in love with it. And a lot of the comments have echoed the sentiments that I've had going into this series, and I'm absolutely in love. So, to get to the comments that have been talked about, HBanana7 with episode 2 says, when Kazuma refers to Smile's school team as those playing in Yukata, he is degrading them to those who play ping pong at onsen. For some reason, many hot springs have ping pong tables for the guests. I did not know this, so that is a really cool cultural fact about ping pong to know. So I'm glad that they said that. Asio Ravenclaw 2052, sup fellow Ravenclaw, says for episode 3, speaking of China, here's a fun fact. The athlete Kong Wenge is inspired by Ma Wenge, who was once interviewed about this anime. I love that. I love the idea when, I mean, obviously, that's why they have to have the disclaimer of, oh, these characters are just fictional. They're not based on real people, places, or things. So they don't get sued or have defamation and stuff like that. But I feel like in this case, though, it is kind of cool when you have an anime character that's as amazing as Kong Wenge that you are based off of. So it's like, that's pretty awesome. I would not be offended if Kong's character were based off me. I would consider that a high compliment. So that's really cool to know. And then Richard K.H. Chang for episodes 4 and 5 had these 2 comments. For episode 4, I guess the only thing to mention is that I much prefer the official translation of what Kong says back to his coach. Your words save me. I went into this series not thinking that Kong's storyline would be as heartfelt and sentimental as it is. And I have been so surprised and just fallen in love with this series and how it handles those characters. It's just, Kong's storyline just melts my heart. And then Richard K.H. Chang says for episode 5, Kong's handler or translator is the one that's boarding the plane to go back to China in episode 5. Kong can't go back yet unless he gives up on his ping pong career because he still hasn't improved his standing at all. That's why Kong cheekily spoke to him in Japanese, because Kong is still being paid to help the club and decided to stay in Japan to do so. But he doesn't have a translator now. Essentially, he's telling his translator, don't worry, I can handle being in here in Japan on my own. Okay, now by the time we've gotten to episode 8, all of that makes sense. But in the moment, in episode 5, I was a little confused over, was he going back? Was he leaving? But him sending his translator back, I kind of love that because it also shows, Kong kind of embracing the Japanese culture a little bit, whereas he was so like pushing it away at the beginning and thinking he was above it. That's so good. I love that little detail. So thank you for telling me that. I appreciate it. And then Shimoyama has 2 comments, one for episode 5, one for episode 6. Shimoyama says for episode 5, when Sakuma takes practice off, Sanada says, I can't laugh, his poster he put up on the wall instead of his room. It's funny. And the image of the poster is inserted, which is saying the person in the poster is Kokichi Tsuburaya, who won the bronze medal at a marathon in the Tokyo Olympics in 1964, but then committed suicide. Tsuburaya was famous for his stoical attitude towards his pain. That's why Sanada is worried about Sakuma. Also, you're right, Sanada speaks a dialect, but it's not Kansai Bend. I guess he speaks Hakata Ben, or a dialect of the Kyushu area. So cool, I'm glad to get the confirmation it's not Kansai Ben, but it's Hakata Ben. But also, yeah, that adds a whole nother context to Sanada being worried about Sakuma, because Sakuma's like idolizing an athlete that committed suicide, and he's like, which essentially in, all respects, Sakuma kind of commits athletic professional suicide by facing Smile and then getting beaten by him. So I'm so wild. And then Shimayama for episode 6, episode 7 is not out on Patreon as I'm recording this, said, also marriage between cousins is legal in Japan. So even if they are related with blood, Yuri's crush is legitimately, by Japanese standards, okay. That's good to know. Look, I'm not saying that there haven't been cousins get married in the United States. There have been. But from my perspective, I grew up in a very rural Midwest area where incest and inbreeding is, not looked at with great. It's looked down upon. It's not really looked at. It gets mocked a lot. But I also raise livestock, and I don't know. I know that humans and livestock are different, but I've seen cattle and goats and stuff inbred, and then they come out with like 3 legs, and you're like, so I'm kind of like, no. If I saw you at the family reunion, I don't think we can get it on. So culturally, that may be okay in Japan. Y'all may be fine with that. Cool beans. For me, culturally, it is a hurdle that I'm like, and I know I've read a lot of BL and stuff that have incest tropes, and I just can't do it. It is a cultural hurdle that I cannot overcome. And so I'm rooting for Sanada. I'm rooting for Sanada and Yuri. She may break his heart later, but I'm rooting for Sanada to have that chance to have his heart broken, because I think it's better for him to love her and date her and then realize it's not going to work out than to sit there and stew eternally being like, I wish we could date and just find out. Just let it happen. And if it doesn't work out, he can at least have the knowledge, I tried, it didn't work, I can move on. Otherwise, I think it's just going to haunt him for the rest of his days, and I don't want that for Sanada. I don't want that for anybody. So thank you all so much for your comments and your kindness this year. Also, thank you so much for not spoiling me, because I really appreciate that. But I am so excited for episode 8. Y'all, I can't even describe to you how excited I am, but we're not going to waste any more time. We are going to start episode 8 of Ping Pong, the animation, and we are going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's do it to it. What'd I tell you? Bitch. Oh my God. Rule of 8 does not let down. I can count on one hand with 2 fingers the times that the rule of 8 has maybe not lived up to its as high standard. I can count on one hand and 2 fingers, but it's so good. This episode was so good. This series is so good. Man, coming full circle and getting confirmation about things, because people in the comments and myself, we've been wondering, like, well, what does the enter the hero mean? Who is the hero? What is that? And Smile constantly talks about, like, do you believe in heroes? I feel like that conversation back in episode 3, when Smile asks Peco about that, I feel like it was a way of Smile trying to validate that notion of heroes, where he's like, hey, he doesn't want to Smile's not emotional. Well, he doesn't want to show outward emotion. I think Smile is very emotional. He just does a good job of hiding it. But he doesn't want to outwardly say, Peco, you're my hero because you've stood up for me all this time and you give me hope and you inspire me and you've made me want to play ping pong and find my place in the world. He doesn't want to come out and say that, because that's not Smile. That's not how he is. So back in episode 3, when he's like, do you believe in heroes? I feel like in a way that was Smile trying to communicate with Peco, like, well, if you believe in heroes, let me tell you, you are mine. And Peco at the time was not in the place to understand where Smile was coming from, and he was not in the right place to fully embody the hero that Smile believes that he is. I can't believe the journey that Peco has gone on to get to this point. I went from episodes 1 through 5 not liking Peco. Like, and I didn't like him because he was a bad character. I was frustrated with him because he wasn't living up to his potential, and he was just like skating by and riding on his like of his self-proclaiming of being this table tennis professional that he was going to be, and he wasn't putting in the work to demonstrate that that was true. And then he had to like get thrown through the ringer. He had to get thrown out into the water and get baptized by the truth. And now he's come back and put in the work and been like, okay, if I want to do this, I got to do it right. And it's like, I love seeing a character like Peco go through this transformation, and you root for him in this episode. And when you find the lineup, you're like, oh shit, you're gonna have to go through hell in this tournament. But I want him to face Smile at the end. And the thing about it is these characters and their transformations and their growth isn't at the behest of other characters. Like Sakuma has gone through a transformation, even though he's kind of gone to the wayside for now. Kong, Wenge has gone through a massive transformation in his character from the start of the series. Smile, I would argue that ironically enough, Smile and Kazuma show the least outward transformation, but it's still there. Whereas Kong and Peco kind of have gone through some of the more drastic transformations. And of course, it's only fitting they face each other this episode. But so basically, Sonata has to face, I brought my working out here. So we're at the Inner Highs again. We are at the Inner Highs for the next year. Whereas now the characters were first years. Now they're second years. Wenge is now a third year, as is Kazuma. I can't believe we've gone through an entire year, a course of a year from episodes 1 to 8, which is wild to me, but it felt so seamless. I was like, oh, it's only been a few months. And I'm like, no shit, it's been a year. So that's so crazy. But then also to see how different everything is, to see how different things are, to see the similarities, to see the differences. So in going back to this episode, we start out with the coach saying that, you know, we're gonna be in the preliminaries again. So we have the idea of Kaio wanting to secure the top 4 spots, which is not going to happen. No, poor Kong. We're going to put Kong up here. He's out, unfortunately. I think that it's going to be Smile versus Peco. And then I think in the semifinals, it's going to be Sonata and Kazuma who go out and who don't make it past the semifinals, is what I think is going to happen. I think that because they said that in the semifinals, Peco would have to face Kazuma. And up until this episode, I would think, oh, there's no way Pico's going to beat Kazuma. But Kazuma is not on his A game. Kazuma is going through some things. Kazuma is feeling like the deterioration from the pressure that he's been dealing with and not finding appropriate channels to outlet that. And so it's starting to like corrupt him and break him down from within. So that's a thing, which we'll talk about in this episode. But I definitely think, especially after Peco showing out and beating Kong, yeah, Peco could beat Kazuma. Which, back in episode 3, it was like nobody could beat Kazuma. Not even Smile. And then the whole story was about Smile getting to that place, which Smile now is kind of paralleling Kazuma with the whole 50-game winning streak. And it's like, what do we do? But I think what's really important to note is that Kong was transformed. He was transformed, and I would say for good, with his team. I love how we've examined the concept of teams versus self-play and how different people react and develop differently under different circumstances. It's one of the things I absolutely love about this show is that they go through all the different ways that teams function, all the ways in which they work or don't work, and how they can change you. And Kong has been transformed by being on his team. And I would argue it's for good, right? Because the Kong that we saw at the beginning of the series, he looked down upon the Japanese players. He was so hyper-focused on winning that he was neglecting like his own self-care and perspective. And he's come so far. He lost to Peco, which I was really sad. I'm glad Kong got to show off in that first match against a guy that was kind of like the Sakuma equivalent, right? So we had the one guy from Kaio that was like, his name was it Netamura? We'll get his name on here. he was on there, that he got to face him in that first round. But the idea that he now has this gratitude, but also more importantly, this drive. This drive, and I think the most important thing about Pong is that it is healthy. That in relation to Kazuma especially, because I would argue that you could probably say that Smile's drive is not particularly healthy in a sense, but it's hard to say that with Smile because we've not really gotten his head, and he's just, he doesn't seem like he's on an unhealthy path. He seems self-aware of what he's doing. He knows how he is, and he's doesn't seem like he's doing anything toxic. Kazuma is in like kind of a toxic competitive environment where with Kazuma, we might as well put him up here. With Kazuma, his whole thing is this idea that he is forced or under familial pressure to perform. And the difference between Kazuma and Kong at this point in the story is that Kong kind of goes through, and we'll talk about when he's facing Peco and he talks about like, I wish I'd gone to Europe, which was really funny. But for Kong, I think he's come to the realization that he doesn't mind staying behind in Japan now. He wants to go home. He wants to be with his mom. He wants to make her proud. He wants to do well for his country. But unlike the beginning of the series, Kong is kind of okay with the idea that, yeah, I may have to stay in Japan and train, but there are worse things in the world, right? And he doesn't feel it's almost like the pressure is relieved for Kong where he's okay. He's like, because at the end when he says like, say hi to Kazuma, it's like he knew he was going to lose, but rather than being like cocky or, sour about it, he's like, no, I was just beat by a better player. And that just means I need to get tougher and do better and train more. And so I feel like this Kong is so healthy about that competitiveness. He understands that he got beat by somebody better than him, and he understands too that he's like, wow, you changed a lot in a year. I don't even recognize you as a player anymore. That's amazing. But he gives Peco his flowers and he accepts that he still needs to work hard and he's not ready to go back to China, and that's okay. And it's super healthy. And I love that for Kong because Kong kind of felt like he was just sort of in this weird place at the beginning of the season. And now I really am excited for Kong to keep growing as a player. Kazuma, on the other hand, has all of this pressure that's forced on him from his grandfather, the pressure that he doesn't need to be like his father, who was a player, as we find out. All of this pressure is just weighing down on Kazuma. And you can kind of see it, like his grandpa owns the company that is everywhere. It's like everywhere Kazuma looks, there is a reminder of his family's legacy and how if he doesn't live up to that expectation, he's a failure. And Kong, it was the total opposite. Like they had Christmas and karaoke and his mom came and made dumplings with him and they're having the best old time. And we'll talk about that when we get the team and what they say to Kong. But for Kazuma to walk around this tournament, everything is Poseidon. The mats are Poseidon. The walls, there are shoes being sold left and right. Like the balls are Poseidon. Everything around Kazuma at this tournament is a constant reminder that if he does not succeed, he is letting his entire family and legacy down. That pressure is insane. And it's not just seeing the family business around. It's the fact that his grandfather owns the company and is the legendary table tennis player that founded the school. It's the fact that his uncle is the coach. It's the fact that his cousin is estranged with him right now. Get on it, Sonata. Get on it. And I feel for Kazuma. I really do, because I feel like he's in this toxic environment and he keeps on telling himself that he has to do this, he has to get stronger, but you're starting to see in this episode just the cracks form. And that shot of him practicing, we'll talk about that with all the bruises on him. Lord. So yeah, they think that they're going to get in the top block. Don't let your guard down. Go for it, all that. And then we cut to immediately, everybody thinks the main opposition to worry about is Kong and Smile. And who do we cut to? Peco. Peco has gone through such a transformation. I love it. I really do. And honestly, I think what is probably the best thing that could have happened in this series, I really didn't like it at first because when Peco left Smile and they weren't, working out with each other. But honestly, sometimes you can be around people too much. And as a coach, I had that happen 2 years ago. I had a team where there were these two competitors and they were on our team. And they had been competing together on the same team since high school. They'd been high school friends. They competed in high school for like 4 years, and now they were on this team. And this was their second year competing on the team that I was coaching. And you could tell like they were best friends, but competitively, they'd been together so long competing against one another that it had started to like form this wall between them, because one competitor wasn't doing as good as they wanted to, and then they would take that aggression out on themselves, and then the other competitor, and then the other competitor was mad at themselves and that person, and it just started like great against one another, and you could see it happening. And I was like, y'all just need to split up for like 6 months, like just split apart, go do your own thing and grow that way. Because sometimes the sad thing is sometimes you can grow together and smother each other in a way that isn't conducive to growth, right? Even though it is nice that you're best friends with them, sometimes for some people, you need to split apart to grow and then come back and be besties. And so that's what they ended up doing. They're both at different schools now, and they're both doing well, but sometimes you just need that to happen. And that's really hard to tell someone, because if they're friends, you don't want to like break them up or anything, but sometimes you can just see the writing on the wall that you need to split apart for a while to grow. And I feel like with Smile and Peco, Smile almost, he got that initial drive from Peco and then ran with it. And Peco needed to have that baptism by fire. He needed to lose to Smile, to question what he's doing, and then have Sakuma give him the morale booster and then start over from scratch. And now, which the fact that he's gotten so good in less than a year is insane. Peco is just something else. But this one guy that's there, he has like little curly cues. He looks like a guy from a kid's show. The other guy with the big long big hawk, like there's a Blue Lock character. His nickname is like Crow, and he has like, I think it's Karasu, but he has the same hairstyle, and I'm like, you look exactly like Karasu. It's probably a popular hairstyle. What's interesting is when they ask him about Smile, at first they ask him like, how can you be doing all this without going to school? I was questioning that too. Like, how is he at this training camp for so long while being in high school? But hell, I'm sure he'll just make up, like, in March Comes In Like a Lion, which is a series I watched before this, which I highly recommend. The main character there like had to redo a year because they'd missed so much for competition. So they had to redo a year of school. So I'm imagining Peco will probably do the same. It's fine. I'm sure it'll all work out. Peco is not concerned about that right now. But when they ask about Smile, and Pico's like, yeah, you know him, right? And they're like, it's weird cutting to Smile and him having this like smirk on his face, making the pencil, like getting the pencil ready. It's weird to see him smirking. And then Pico's like, yeah, he's amazing. He's super strong. And they're like, he's strong. My brother actually considered quitting. And Pico's like, oh, is that so? Because he did the same thing, right? And they say he's like a robot. They said it's like playing a robot. I feel for Peco because I want Peco to confront Smile in the finale. They're keeping that very close to the chest. They don't want to tell us everything that Pico's thinking, which makes sense because if they face each other in the final, I'm sure all those emotions are going to come out and we're going to hear what that is. So we'll see how that goes. Also, so this guy, the one coach, he has a baby, which is adorable. But they talk about Obaba, and then I love when Peco is like, oh, she was a cutie, and they're like, don't get Peco beer. I love, they're like, do not let Peco get drunk. He'll say crazy things like Obaba was cute. And then his expression when they said, you do realize you took a picture of her statue when we first got here. So this guy that's the captain, is Obaba his mother, like legit mom? Is that the case? Or does he just call her mom like Peco does? Right? The face that Peco makes is amazing. I'm like, dude, if you were born 30 years later. And then they say Cosma and Koizumi, Cosma's grandpa and Koizumi, they're all there. They're childhood friends. And Pico's like, it's a small world. And he's like, yeah, they're childhood friends. And mom was worried about your knee. I mean, we think it's a small world that they were all childhood friends, but that's kind of how those communities are. If you grow up in extracurricular communities like forensics or ping pong or basketball or whatever, families that kind of gravitate to those sports, you kind of stay within those communities unless you actively leave. So of course they would know each other and know who's who and their friends of friends and all of that. But to find out Obaba had the same injury and blew out her knee because of the same thing Pico's facing. And then we had the story last episode about Kaio's coach suffering from an injury, even though it was with his ligaments. And then that caused Koizumi to let him win. I don't know. The one thing is, what I don't want to happen in the finale, because I do think Smile and Peco are going to face each other. I don't want Smile to concede like he did with Kong. And I want both of them to play to their heart's content. I want them both to play and fight to the finish. The question, of course, that Koizumi gave to Smile was, are you going to throw the match if you find out that it could hurt Peco in the long run? So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But I don't think Peco would want Smile to throw the match, right? Speaking of things being different, Kazuma is under the thinker statue in the bathroom, taking this bath and contemplating, unlike episode 5, when Yuri just came in with the flowers and was like, oh, haha, cheery, 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 da, 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 da. Here, she ain't taking no shit. She's done. She's like, you're always taking baths. She has had it up to here with Kazuma. She's like, you're always taking baths. And then she's like, Poseidon will be providing the mats for the Inner High preliminaries. And she says they're doing it to promote sales. She's like, all the Kyle players are going to be wearing dragon mat shoes. And then she says, you should play table tennis for yourself. I'm leaving. So she's heading out. She's like, I'm not staying here. You should do this for yourself. She's like, don't make a scary face. And then he just kind of looks a little bit dejected. But he doesn't look horrifically sad. He just looks kind of dejected. And then it goes up to the thinker statue. It looks kind of depressed. I do like that Yuri tells Kazuma, she's like, don't worry about the family pressure. Do this because you want to do it. She's like, do you want to play table tennis or not? She's like, don't do it because your dad did it. Don't do it because your grandpa was a legend. Don't do it because of the company. She's like, we're going to make money. We're going to be fine. You need to play this for yourself. Not for me, not for anybody else. And are you doing that? I want her to run off with Sonata. I really do. So Koizumi finds out from Obaba that Peco is playing table tennis again. And Obaba says, well, she's like, go ahead and register him. And she's like, he's strangely popular with the team. They'd welcome back and there shouldn't be any opposition. So I guess in order for him to play at the tournament, he has to be under a school team, which is why Koizumi signed him up for Katase's team, even though he's not playing with Katase. It's just the lawful way for it to happen. So that makes sense. But then he asks like how strong Peco has got. What are the odds that he could beat Smile? And she's like, well, I don't want to say anything. She's like, he can't be compared to anyone else, but he'll beat Kazuma. And for Koizumi's face where he's like, what? I do think when she says you gave up on him, I do think that's such an interesting point because he kind of did. He did give up on Peco. He let Peco go. He didn't chase after him. I find that an interesting thing to say because Obaba, she didn't ever give up on Peco, but she also wasn't actively pursuing him. She told him to leave several times and she told him to get out and she didn't mince words with him. But I think it's interesting that she's like, you latched on to Smile because Smile reminds you of yourself and you threw Peco to the wayside. And she's like, I'm latching on to Peco because Peco reminds me of myself. So the funny thing is with Kazuma, I don't think Kazuma is like the grandpa, right? I don't think that's the case at all, which is what's kind of makes this whole thing more frustrating because you have Smile and his coach connecting, Peco and his coach connecting, but Kazuma doesn't really connect with his coaches. He's not really like them. That's the problem. I'm glad Yuri finally is like not just sitting around doing nothing. And she's like, I'm sure he'll beat him. And yeah, Joe looks like, no way, that's not going to happen. And it's like, well. So then we have the robot that is supposedly functioning, rumor has it, on the same level as Smile. But it is like literally firing back 4 paddles at once, which is insane. And that shot, like Kazuma has the face guard on, but his entire body is just pelted with bruises. And he's like, I will become stronger. Like he very much is like Smile trying to be a robot. He's like, I will become stronger, stronger than my father, stronger than the old man. And it like breaks the paddle. And then even then he was like sliding across the floor and everything as the stage is moving. Like, at that point, I thought, okay, Kazuma is hurting himself, and he's like getting distracted by the need to be better than his family and be the best tennis player. Like, he's so caught up in being better than his legacy that he's missing out doing it for himself. So that's interesting. Because I would argue that Peco and Smile are doing it for themselves for different reasons, but still doing it for themselves. Kong is doing it for himself and his own reasons too, but also, I know that the series has multiple protagonists and that's all a big thing, but if you told me I would be rooting for Peco at this point and that Peco would be the main character, which honestly, I think there are 4 main characters. I think there are 4 protagonists to this series. It's Kazuma, it's Kong, it's Smile, and it's Peco. They're the ones that have split screen time this entire series. Like, they're all our main actors. But I can't believe, like, it all has come back full circle with Peco. And it's been a year. And this time, instead of Kazuma, that everybody is like everybody's still intimidated by Kaio. They still like look to Kaio and they know Kazuma, but it's one of those things like Kazuma, he's kind of old turkey at this point. Like, everybody knows that Kazuma's really good. Everybody, it's like old news. They're like, we know you're the champion. We know you've been to the Olympics. We expect you. Again, talking about that pressure, they expect him to be amazing. Smile is the new blood that they are like, oh, this guy's not lost in 50 matches. Isn't that crazy? He's like a robot. Like, he's the new gimmick. And it seemed like Smile was waiting to see Peco. Like, you could argue he was waiting to see Kazuma, but I think he was waiting to see Peco. And then they're like, they make him come inside. So yeah, they all get out the bus. They all have the purple bus. They all get gathered about it. And they're like, the rumor has it that they input Sugimoto into Dragon's computer into table tennis, the robot, for practice. Okay. So, okay, something isn't right. I love the montage where it was the mats on the floor and everybody's like, it felt like the, and I know now that there's a manga for this series, which is amazing. I'm probably gonna have to look at the manga on my own time, but I love the fact that everybody's like, but it's very much a mockery of the sports montage where in the manga there's like all the big double spread collage and everybody's like, oh my God, did you notice? And it's like, amazing. Because everything has mats on the floor. They've got mats, and somebody, I like the guys on Kong team slipped, and they're like, didn't Cosmo say mat shoes are totally different? Wasn't that the commercial? But they're selling them, and then everybody bought mats. It's a very persuasive commercial. I would want to buy those shoes after reading it. Plus, they're purple. Purple's great. I like that immediately after everybody's been buying the shoes, and I love that after everybody's gone to the trouble buying the shoes and it's this big old thing, the one guy with Obaba and Pico's like, yeah, the mats are probably irrelevant. I love it. I love that Kong's like, nope, I got my butterfly shoes. I have my lucky shoes. I'm not changing them. Smile is not interested in changing because he's like, whatever. That doesn't fit his MO. Pico doesn't change. Kong doesn't change. Kazuma doesn't change. We'll talk about Kazuma not changing. But I like that the one guy's like, it won't matter. Professional players don't use special shoes on mats, so no. But again, it's amazing, brilliant marketing from Kaio because they're like, their team did really well at nationals and people are like, how did they do it? And they're like, well, we have these special shoes. That's how we do it. So I mean, it's genius marketing, but I love that the people in the know are like, no, don't buy those shoes. That's dumb. They're like, where's Smile in the stadium? And I like the one guy's like, I wanted to talk to him. And Obaba's like, yeah, go talk to him later. What's the bracket? And so your second round opponent's going to be Kong. I love Kong. Him showing up, has the glasses, has the same coat on, has the same outfit he had on last year we saw him. Just looking so cool, doing the comb through the hair. I've really loved Kong, and I'm glad it seems he's going to stick around even after losing this round. I want to see him successful, and I want to see him be able to go back to China and be with his mom. But I love him, and I love the support he has with his team. It's so good. And his coach is back here with him. Or the translator's back, right? And he's like, oh, I've got China in the second round. And like, well, if you make it past that, there's no one special until Kazuma in the semifinals. At that moment, Pico, I was like, oh my God, I was not expecting Pico to face both Kong and Kazuma in the same bracket. Like, holy shit. But if anything's going to guarantee that he gets with Smile in the finals, and you know They're not going to have, I mean, I don't know. This series could surprise me, and maybe it will. I can't imagine Sonata and Peco in the finals. It's going to be Smile. He's like, what about Smile? And he says, oh, well, if you play Smile, it'll be in the final. The only person in his way would be Sonata in the third round. The others don't stand a chance. Like, is he strong? And like, he's Kaio's vice captain. He's like, okay. So that seems to be like all Peco needs to know. He's like, I'm probably going to face Smile in the final. But I don't know. Maybe Sonata will beat Smile. I doubt it. I think thematically they're going to have them face in the final, but stranger things have happened. But I love that he's like, oh, thanks, Michio. And he walks around. He's like, oh, I'm totally fine. And they're like, he looks pretty unaffected. When you're aiming from the top, you're bound to face monsters. And I love that we cut to him and he's like, I'm going to die. I love Peco so much in this episode because it's such a real reaction. He's like, I'm totally fine. Everything's great. I got to face Kong and then Sonata, and then I got to face Kong and then Kazuma, the Olympic, medalist, and then Smile in the final. Yeah, I'm totally good. Oh my God. But I don't know. I say that it will be Peco and Smile in the final. But what if Peco can't face Kazuma? What if he loses to Kazuma? And then that motivates Smile to be his own hero when he faces Kazuma in the finals. I don't know. This series has been so good because you can't quite predict what route it's going to go to, like the bracket this episode. So I don't know what we'll end up getting. We could end up getting a lot of different things. It's all kind of left up to chance to figure out. He's like, I want to die. But one thing I love is that we go back to Kong and he says, our team's grown pretty strong. It's so sweet. He's like, it was like teaching babies to read and write. So this guy's the translator, the guy with the China shirt on, right? And he's like, today's matches aside, we should fare pretty good as a team. For Kong, he's grown up so much where he's just talking about like his team doing well. Like, it's not just about him anymore. He's sitting here focusing on his team. And again, that's in total opposition to Kazuma, because at the beginning, Kong was like, I'm by myself. I'm a loner. I'm from China. I don't fit in. I'm doing this just for myself. I don't need you guys. And now he's like, my team's going to do all right. We're going to be good. That's so sweet. And then it's total contrasting to Kazuma, whose team is kind of falling apart because Kazuma's not being a good captain. He's being too obsessive about what's going on with himself and his skills. And everybody's like, we really would like Sonata to be the team captain. So it's like, it's so wild seeing how different this moment is and seeing how different these two teams are. But yeah. And they're like, I believe in you, Wingay. I love it. He's like, there's a player who's a threat to him, and it's Smile. He's like, I won't play them until the semifinals. Well, you're not going to play them at all. He's like, just once, I'd like to beat Kazuma and get my ticket home. And the thing is, maybe one day in the future, Kong will play Kazuma and will win. We'll see. So basically, at this point, we had the first round where Peco won. And now we had the second round where we had Peco won and Kong is out. Now we just have to get, so in the semifinals, we're thinking that it's going to be Smile versus Sonata. And we think it'll be Kazuma versus Peco. The one thing that's kind of cool is that if you think about it, Smile and Sonata, up until these matches and up until last year, Smile was kind of in Peco's shadow, and then he overtook him. And then you had Sonata, who's always been in Kazuma's shadow, and in regards to Yuri, is maybe overtaking him. I don't know. But I think that's interesting. You have Smile and Sonata, who have kind of followed behind Peco and Kazuma this whole time, facing off against each other. And then you have Peco and Kazuma facing each other, who are like the heroes to the other players. Except for Sonata, Kazuma has he's a fallen hero now because he's not living up to the expectations that Sonata had for him. And for Peco, Smile's kind of like, welcome back, hero. Like you've resurrected yourself. You've come back. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Indeed. Indeed, indeed, indeed. So, but yeah. And then they're like, well, why aren't you wearing the shoes? And he's like, well, they have nothing to do with me. And so I was like, oh, like, which is unusual for Kazuma. And he's like, well, that's lame. We're all wearing the shoes, but Kazuma isn't. That was such a wild moment in a lot of ways because one, Kazuma is like so frustrated with the pressure that's held upon him. He wants to distance himself from his family. So he's like, I don't give a shit about those shoes, which is, you know, quite the statement from someone whose family is selling said shoes. So it shows he's pissed off about the business model. Then Sonata's like, well, we all look like assholes for wearing these shoes that our own captain and grandson of the corporate president won't wear himself, so it makes it look lame. So it works on a lot of different levels, right? And then Kong's like, I am not wearing those shoes. He's like, purple is not my color. But what I love about this moment is with Kong and his team, because they're all like, well, we have the shoes. Aren't you going to wear them? And he's like, no, I got my butterfly shoes. I want to wear those. But Kong's character has come so far because instead of telling his teammates being like, why'd you guys waste your money on them lame shoes? They were like $100 each. What? Instead, he says, you know, hey, I'm going to stick with my butterfly shoes, but everyone should wear good shoes. So if you guys bought those shoes, it's okay. You guys did good. Those shoes will probably help you today, and that's all right. It makes me want to cry. It makes me want to cry because it's just so emotional seeing how far Kong's team has come and seeing how kind he is. And I just love Kong's character so much. I'm like, it's just all of my love. His character just completely, I'm enamored with him and how much he's grown and how sweet he is. It's so good. So I like the idea that we have both Smile and Kong testing out the Poseidon balls. And then, of course, I also love that Joe, I'm noticing it now, and it's been there the whole time, but I'm now really seeing it. When the coach, Kozumi, has the shirt on, it has a butterfly because he's Butterfly Joe. Everything about this series is amazing. I love this series so much. So Smile's not bothered by the mats. Smile instead is like, where's Peco? And he's like, do you have any advice, coach? And he's like, well, you're the greatest player I know, so just keep doing what you're doing. I don't know anything else to tell you. So the one guy, I feel bad for him. The guy that goes up against Kong and loses the first round, he was kind of like the Sakuma equivalent where he was the up-and-coming person for Kaio's team that was coming up and rising through the ranks, and he faces Wingay. I felt for him because Wingay looked great. Kong had an amazing game. He looked wonderful. He was on fire, having a great time. But the thing that sucks is that he starts to question. He's like, well, is it talent that is the reason I'm losing? Is it, is my team going to get mad at me? And he's like, I probably became a starter because Kaio has fallen. That, lack of self-confidence is what? I felt so bad for him because he essentially was saying, well, my team, they probably only made me a starter because we're not as good as we used to be. So I'm like subpar anyway. So that's probably why. What the fudge? No. I wanted, as a coach myself, I wanted to just shake him and be like, what are you even talking about? No. If you walk in with a losing mentality, you will lose. That is just how the game works. And I tell students all the time on our teams, I'm like, you have to walk in with confidence, knowing you're going to win. I mean, there is a difference between arrogance and confidence. There is a difference. And if you walk in and you've practiced and done the work, you can walk in with confidence and be like, I'm going to get the one in this round. I don't care who you are. I don't care what your speech is. My speech is better. I'm going to do well. But if you walk in and you're like, oh no, I'm up against so-and-so, I'm not going to beat them. Guess what? You're not. You won't beat them. If you walk in with a losing mindset, you will not win. And it's so frustrating to watch a character go through that. Although, I do love seeing Kong comb his hair. I'm like, I felt bad for him. But yeah, okay, so he's a second year too, Kong is. Okay, I thought he was a third year. Never mind. And then Peco is a second year from Katase. And then Smile. Is a second year. And then this one guy that okay, so Nakota. Nakota is not the guy that lost against Kong. He's going to be somebody else that's facing. I think he faced Smile. Or no, he advanced to round 2. Okay. Then I like Sonata with the coat over him. He's a second year as well. They're all the same grade. What? What is this? What is this? I thought he was a third year. First seed. Okay. Kazuma is the third year. Okay. So, of all of them, Kazuma is the one who's graduating. This is his last year. This is his last chance. And then he's graduating, right? But the others have another year to go. Wild! I thought Kong was older than that. He looks older than that, but I guess because he's maybe from China, the age requirements are different or whatever. I really, now that we know his family's like trauma with bathrooms and how his family deal with stress in the bathrooms, the toilet scene feels so much darker and more morbid than it did before. But then we have, like, we go immediately from that darkness and sadness. I feel for Kazuma. I feel bad for him because he's in a really bad place mentally right now. But then we change that by going up to Kong's team, who are like lifting up and be like, "We did it, sir. It's all thanks to you and all this." And they are like kumbayaing, and I want to like hug them all, and I love them. And they're just like having fun and being the best team. They're like, they have the Karasuno colors of black and orange. They're just the best. I love them so much. They're having the most fun, and I love all of them. But then, while we have this, we're like, call me when you're in a pinch. Say it thrice in your heart. Enter the hero. We get confirmation of what this entire scene is. Do that, and I'll be there. We didn't know exactly what all this was meaning and referring to until we got to this episode. And we know that it's Peco, that he's literally the Icarus flying to the sun, right? Or in the moon in this case. So now we get in the second round matches. And we have Kong versus Peco. I don't know why they switched. I'm going to look this up. Why, since we have, because I'm sure the comments would tell me, why do ping pong players switch rackets? What's the point of that? So it says, why do they inspect? Oh, why do they inspect each other's rackets? Okay. So there's two answers. Of course, I'm going to Reddit to find this. So it says to know what the opponent's plays with is the most common reason. It happens that a player will never use one of their rubbers during warm-up and hope the other players don't notice it until the first points. It can be surprising if the rubber is unusual, like pips or anti-spin, etc. It also allows you to get to know different brands and types of rubbers if you're interested in that. Okay. So the main reason is there are strict rules on the racket's composition, mostly on the rubber sheets themselves. While I've never seen this particular rule used as a player or an umpire, I think it needs to exist to give a player the right to inspect the other player's racket and present any suspicious equipment to the umpire for examination. That's what I want. That's what I was thinking. In the reaction, I was like, are they checking each other's rackets out to make sure there's nothing suspicious and that there's nothing that's going to be like disqualifiable? That's what I said. Not only are the rubber sheets and rackets themselves subject to limitations of various sorts, even the glue that holds the rubber on the racket can be declared illegal. While a certain method called speed glue was used during the years that I was active, it gave the users an unfair advantage of some kind and or a possible danger such as fumes, flammability. It was outlawed fairly quickly after its introduction. Well, yeah, okay, so for example, when Kazuma is playing against the machine and his racket breaks, if you had like an industrial strength super glue or something that would keep your racket together, or like a rod of steel or something in there, then yeah, that might be something that would be an illegal advantage. Cool. Okay. That makes sense. I love when Kong's like, I remember you from last year, and Peco said, I wish you'd forgotten. That freaking line where he says, I wish you'd forgotten. Peco went up 1,000 badass points for me in that one line alone. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Holy shit. Yes. Yes, please. Hello, sir. And they're like, a Japanese pinhole grip with a rubber back. This kid. He's like, I've been renewed. I look forward to our match. I love the fact that Peco's like, I've been reborn. We're gonna go. We're gonna play. It's gonna be great. That confidence. Meanwhile, Smile's over here like, I want to watch him play. I'm like, oh. So, and Kazuma's a pretty good judge of character. Kazuma believes that Kong's gonna lose to Peco. And then they're like, who is he? And they're like, Kong is probably panicking. He skunked his opponent a year ago. There is nothing more damaging to a person's ego than when you trounced somebody a year ago and they come back and they're beating you. Like, that's That's when you know. And it's like, oh, is this the same guy from a year ago? No, it is not. He's completely different. I love how Peco looks in this match. He looks so good. And then, of course, the coach is like, hey, he doesn't have a reverse side. And Pico's like, well, actually, I do. I just wasn't going to show you to the last minute. He does use a reverse side as well. I like the one guy, Machio. He was like, I told him not to test it on somebody tough first. And then I love when Obaba's like, I love you, Peco. Yes! I'm so glad. I felt it's so conflicting because I love that Peco won, but then I also am really sad that Kong lost. And Smile stopped mid-game to watch. She was like, oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry, I was distracted. And then him saying, welcome back, hero. I love it. What an unbelievable kid. It's a game to him. The way he kicks people in the back to instantly climb up the ranks is terrifying. And like with Smile is so much of a robot that winning, there's not any ambition. There's not any like personal gain. He's just embraced the fact that he believes he's emotionless, like people have told him. And he's like, well, fine, if I'm a robot, then I'm just going to be a robot and beat you all that way. But with Peco has this ambition. Peco has this goal, this mission to be the best table tennis player in the country, to go to the Olympics. He has this ambition and goal. And for him, he's also kind of got like an arrogance to him. Like Pico's always had this kind of like sense of entitlement. And so when he's like, I'm going to beat you and then stomp on your back and climb up the ladder, like it's part of his personality. And I love that it's built off of that. It's great. And like, do you think Kong panicked and it's his downfall? And I like that Cosmo's like, no, I don't think that's totally it. I think that Pico's also that good. And it wasn't just the fact that it was a surprise, but Pico's put in the work. And he's like, when we first played a year ago, you couldn't get 1 point off of me. And he says, GG, Kong-san. I was like, ah! Peco, like, how did he in one episode... And then he's like, I needed to face an opponent like you. Thanks to you, I was able to grow stronger. And he's like, I love it. He's like, you taught me. That one image of him holding up the paddle is what is going to be, that's going to be the thumbnail probably, is Peco with the sweaty face holding up the paddle where he says, you taught me how to fly. Because that's the crazy thing. Like at the very beginning of the series, it wasn't Smile getting better that made Peco quit. It wasn't Smile's success. It wasn't Sakuma beating Peco. It was back at the very beginning. Him losing to Kong started this whole trajectory. And he's like, you taught me to fly. Oh my God. And then we see him as the hero robot. Mm-hmm. And I love that Kong gets like, he stares in disbelief for a second and then he's like, and the thing about it is that Kong knows exactly what Pico's talking about. He's like, yeah. He's like, I had to lose too before I could start growing as well. He's like, so I get where you're coming from. We see eye to eye. I was like, it's so damn good. And him clutching his heart, like his jersey, like he realizes that he's like, I'm probably going to lose this. And there's the gold chain. That's the medal he got from a kid in the locket. And like all his ambition, but, I love it. And then seeing Peco, the talent. Oh, I love everything about this match of Peco versus Kong. It's so good. I can't believe it. And then he's like, say hi to Kazuma for me. And I like that it's a little bit like kind of a backhanded compliment where the coach, Sugimoto's like, oh, you didn't watch me play the match? He's like, no, I knew you'd win. And then when Smile says, I actually lost, for a hot second, I thought he was telling the truth. Because we don't know. You can't tell if Smile is lying or telling the truth about winning or losing. And he was like, what? And he's like, no, I'm kidding. But he's like, I had to watch Peco. And then at that moment, he's like, you're not going to watch? And he's like, I know that he'll win. Just like how the coach said, I have faith that you're going to win, Smile, in your match, so I don't need to watch. Smile's like, no, I know Peco's going to win. Oh my God, y'all. Oh my God. And that just shows how much Koizumi and Smile are the same, right? And then it says out. Yep. He says, if I knew I'd be living here this long, I would have gone to Europe. Maybe Sweden or Germany. He's like, I'll get to the top 4 and head to nationals. Japan, huh? Oh, I love him. I feel so bad that Kong has to lose this round. But I also, if he was going to lose to somebody, when he says, say hi to Kazuma for me, and Pico's like, what? Pico's like, excuse me? What are we talking about? But yeah, do you have your ticket? I'll be waiting for you. And the mom. Oh, and the coach walking away and the team. Oh, everything about that. And the mom saying, welcome home. I was just, like, you want him to win so badly, and you want him to, like, live out his dream and do all that, but then it's like, but you know that he's going to keep playing and that Kong's not done, but it just, all of his motivations. I feel like I don't think we'll see Kong play the rest of the series. I could be wrong. I feel like the next matches are going to be leading up to Smile versus Sonata, and then Kazuma versus Peco, which would be episodes 9 and 10. And then episode 11 would be the final. So that's what I feel like is going to happen. But with this series, we have 3 episodes left. I just don't know. But oh my God, like the match went to him, to Hoshino. And then call me when you're pinched. Say it thrice in your heart. Enter the hero. And we see Peco with the mask on and the belt and the ping pong paddle saying, I'll be there. I'm from the planet Ping Pong. Uh-huh. Yep. I mean, it's so good to see the confirmation, because back in episode 3, I thought that maybe the robot inside Smile was that inner robot, the one with the wings, was like him trying to burst free, and the other robot was like him holding himself down, and it was his conflicting personalities. No, the pale robot that's destroying everything is Smile. But the hero robot is Peco, who's his personal hero, and I love this series so much. This episode was amazing. This episode was so good. So good. There's so much to talk about, and I cannot wait to hear y'all's thoughts about this episode down below. Please, no spoilers, but we have 3 episodes left, and I cannot wait to see how these next rounds end up, and if we get the semifinal or the final that we're thinking of, or if the show's going to completely go a direction I'm not prepared for. We'll see! We'll see! So, in any case, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yes! I love ping pong so much, and I cannot wait to get back to y'all with episode 9 next week, and I'll see you there with more reactions. Bye.